Hello everybody and welcome back to The Pale Thread. I am Kat Martin, your host. Today we're going to cover a story that really triggers some sensitivities for me. Anyone who knows me knows that I have a soft spot for old people, older generations, and especially men. I feel like older men have a hard time speaking about how they're feeling. I have a soft spot for them because I just want to hug them and tell them that they're loved. And the victim of today's case is a 69-year-old homeless man who was brutally murdered by someone that you can only qualify as psychopathic. Today we're going to cover the murder of Warren Barnes, committed by Brian Cohee in the winter of 2021. So together, let's pull the thread and see where it leads us. The events of today's case happen in Grand Junction, Colorado in 2021, as I said a bit earlier. Grand Junction is a pretty popular town, I feel like. It has a population of about 70,000 people, and it's a name that I've heard quite a bit. Even though I'm Canadian, I know of Grand Junction. Colorado is one of the states that I do want to visit eventually. It is a town that was founded in 1882, and from what I understand, it is mostly known for its big mountains, probably like most of Colorado. Our story for today starts in early morning of 2021, February 28th. This is the day of my birthday, so weird connection there, but on the morning of February 28th, police are called to the Blue Heron boat ramp that gives in directly into the Colorado River. And basically they get there and there is a family there. There is a young man who's sitting in the pickup with his dad, and they meet with a mother that is quite flustered. She's trying to act very lighthearted and be kind of jovial about it, but her son's car is in the river. It is mostly sunken down in the river, and she says that her 19-year-old son, Brian Cohee Jr, was basically taking a night stroll, decided to park his car on the boat ramp, and basically was not able to get out of that boat ramp, and the car just basically sunk into the river. But it's February, okay? So it's very cold. Brian is limit hypothermic. He has removed his pants and he's sitting, like I said, in the truck with his dad. So the police kind of try to figure out what happened. They have no suspicion of anything that could be wrong or other than a car that is in a river. The police decide to go speak directly to Brian. He lowers the window of the passenger side of his dad's truck, and they ask him a couple questions, and they ask him to get out of the truck, and he says, "Do you mind if I stay in? I don't have any pants." And the police officer is like, "Yeah, no, buddy, stay in there, that's fine." And Brian just explains that he wanted to clear his head. He just wanted to take a drive and then maybe get out of his car, just maybe clear his mind a little bit. And that he didn't have four-wheel drive on his car, and it ended up in the river. They're trying to get a tow truck there, but at that time of the night, it's kind of hard to get people to come over and get the car out of the river. The mother asks if he can go home, if she can take her son home so he can sleep, because it's pretty late in the night. The officer said, "Yeah, no problem. He's not being detained. He can go ahead." The mother, Terry Cohee, takes her son back home, and she comes back. At that point, they're able to connect with a tow truck that gets there, and the police is still there with the family and the tow truck. And they're pulling the car out, and they notice that there is a red substance on the lower part of the license plate on the bumper of the car. And they automatically think that this looks like blood. So they go see Terry and they ask, "Is your son injured?" And she says, "Not that I know of." And they say, because there's quite a bit of blood on the bumper, what we think is blood. And Terry automatically thinks about, I think he did some kind of like a theater camp or something, but he had fake blood at some point in his car. So she's thinking maybe that's it. Maybe it leaked. So the police officers asks, can you call your son and ask him if he's okay? And they call Brian. Brian sounds really chill, and he's like, there's what on the bumper? And they say there's blood on the bumper. And he says, no, I'm fine. There's actually nothing wrong with me. And the mom thinks maybe it's his recently stitched up abscess surgery that he got on the side of his body. He got an abscess removed, and she thought maybe the stitches got open, and under adrenaline rush, he didn't feel it. But he looks at himself and he says, no, mom, I'm fine. And they drop it. For some reason, they did not keep the car. The police department did not keep the car. They released it to Brian's parents. I want to stop here for a second and kind of dig into who Brian Cohee Jr. is. He's 19 years old. He graduated high school recently. And Brian is an odd kid. Very odd. In high school, we all had those people who didn't exactly fit in. To be completely honest, I was sort of sometimes a kid that didn't always fit in, especially in middle school and like before high school. I was always the odd kid out. Brian was known to have a very dark sense of humor. I've always had quite a bit of a dark sense of humor, obviously, because I have interests like this. But I've never been scary to people. I don't think so. I don't think that I've ever worried, other than my mom, I don't think I've ever worried someone with my interests or my humor. Brian would cross the line very often. He had friends. He didn't trust them completely, and I don't know if they trusted him completely. So he wasn't completely a loner. He had friends. But in school, a lot of people hated him because he didn't understand the lines between appropriate jokes and non-appropriate jokes. He was diagnosed with ADHD, autism, functional Asperger's, major depressive disorder, and what he refers to as schizo-something, in the sense that he remembers his therapist diagnosing him as schizo-something, but he can't remember exactly what it was. But that medley of mental disorders often does not mesh well with other neuronormal people, right? But he also had a fascination with serial killers, with the Columbine shooters, with serial killers from movies and shows. That alone to me does not worry me, because I am one of those people. I had a huge fascination with serial killers when I was a kid. I used to print out stuff, read it before bed, but I didn't have the cocktail of everything, the mental disorders that Brian has. So it made for a very strange kid. I was able to find on Reddit some posts that he had made that were later removed, but I was able to search for them and find some posts that he had done in 2018 and 2019. I bet there are others, but my search kind of revolved around those years, and that would be about 2 to 3 years before the events. In December 2018, he reports that he was at school and he had made a makeshift weapon from tape and a pencil. And he took that makeshift weapon, he basically put it in his hand to create a harder punch, I guess, and punched a kid behind the head. That kid fell down to the ground, and Brian thought that was hilarious. I don't know about you, but I don't find violence funny. Anyways, he got in trouble for that. He says that his mother tended to be a lot more severe than his dad, so he feared his mom. He feared his mom a bit more than his dad. He also reports a lot of feelings of depression, of suicide, and also lack of remorse about, hurting another kid. He also, in that same month, he did a little pile of stuff in his room and he burned it. He started getting a bit paranoid on certain things, and notably in that instance, when he went to bed, he was paranoid that the ashes would actually burn the ground of his room and him with it. He also has paranoia about people watching him outside of his window. He also, for some reason, thinks that he's afraid that if he hangs out with his friends, at some point they will randomly attack him or even try to kill him. And in what I think that is that is projection. I think that because those are thoughts that he has towards his friends, that is something that he thinks that could happen to him, when realistically, that's a very, very slim chance of that happening, right? He mentions suicide quite a lot. He also feels as if he's a lazy person. He thinks he's gonna fail his schooling because he's lazy. He wanted to be he said that he was giving up on his dream of being a nurse anesthetist, and that he was gonna be basically an electrician or an army nurse, because he feels as if he doesn't have the drive that it takes to be what he wanted to be. In January 2019, he mentions being in a relationship with a boy. He says that he likes him, but he doesn't know how the other person feels. He also has like ideals of murderous dictatorship. He fantasizes about it. In that same month, he also recalls enjoying creating a panic attack in a school colleague of his. He knew that this girl was sensitive to loud noises and things like that, and she had PTSD, and he basically went next to her and clapped really, really loudly next to her ear, and it triggered a panic attack. And he has so little empathy towards people that he actually says that she's basically a weak bitch, which is ridiculous. The girl had such a hard time recovering from the panic attack that she was sent home. Also, later in January, he mentions being in a relationship with a trans woman and loving the fact that she was infatuated with him. It's the only 2 times that we mention him being into any type of romantic relationships. But with this particular person, he says that he speaks more about the fact that he likes that she is into him than he is into her, which kind of checks out. He also states that he has killed and tortured a cat in that period of his life. And I do think that someone also recalls him describing this later on, but I wasn't able to listen to him describing it because I can listen to a ton of horrible stuff, but animal cruelty is my limit, and I cannot. He also says that he kept the body of the cat in his room until it started to stink. He also states that when he did this, that he remembers being high on homicide, which is very disturbing. And if you're here, you probably know that one of the first signs of a serial killer is escalation of starting with harming an innocent being like an animal, and then you escalate to something worse. So huge red flag there. In February 2019, he states that he's feeling empty, sad, manic, and depressed. And you also see a couple of his posts that sound more and more angry. His anger kind of ebb and flows, but still, for me, they kind of stood out in that month as pretty aggressive. He's failing classes, and he was also switched from one therapist to the other. He says that the reason why he switched therapists is basically because the other one had a more specialized skill set. The other one didn't really know what to do with Brian. Another sign that his posts were getting a bit more angry to me, he actually quotes, "I want to fuck shit up." So you could see that he has, really negative, angry, violent thoughts in his mind. He also now not only has paranoia on people watching him, but he now has paranoia on things having eyes and watching him. In March 2019, he talks about possibly getting tested for the Center of Vocational Rehabilitation, I guess, to see if his troubles can be rehabilitated. He recalls going to a group kind of therapy thing for people with Asperger's, and instead of kind of going there and relating to people and feeling empathy for the people who were there, he is making really rude comments about the people who are in that group and just sharing personal stories. Again, he speaks of failing his classes. He's sure he's going to fail 11th grade. He also again mentions suicide, and he has paranoid episodes of people being outside of his window with flashlights looking into his room. He also gets in a mindset where he thinks that his friends would be happy if he passed, which is a weird thought to have, and I find it a bit sad. He also gets caught at school with foam nunchucks. And although he hadn't done anything with them, a teacher saw that he had them, and because of his history of violence, they suspended him for 3 days, and they reopened the assault case on that kid that he had punched. And with all that, Brian's mom has a kindergarten at home. That kindergarten is called Terry Cohee Grand Junction, Colorado Daycare Home. And because there were kids close to Brian basically on a daily basis, there was a chance that Terry would get her permit or her license removed and she wouldn't be allowed to have her business at home. But they basically did not give that sentence. They basically told Terry that she needed an emergency plan, basically, in case Brian ever threatened her or the kids or himself. So that's a bit of background on Brian's mindset and his journal that he kept on Reddit. Now I want to jump back to 2021 on March 1st. So the day after the river incident, the Colorado River incident, a 911 call was placed by Terry Cohee asking the Mesa County Police Department to come over to her home because she just found a severed head in a double plastic bag in her son's room, and she needs police to come over immediately. She is at the back of her house basically calling 911 because her son has just come home and she needs them to come over before he gets spooked and leaves. And that's why she's speaking at a low voice and she's hidden basically from her son. The police get there and they have their body cam footage rolling. And when they get there, it's still day out. It's in the afternoon. And they get there and the father, so Brian Cohee Sr., is outside. There is also another young man who is Andy Cohee, who is Brian's brother. And also Terry Cohee is there, and Brian Cohee Jr. is also there. They tried to keep the conversation light until the police arrive. Police get there, and they basically approach, no lights on. I think there's a couple deputy cars there, and there's a deputy that approaches Brian and asks if he can talk to him, and Brian just basically stands up, comes to the police officer, and he's quite calm, not showing much emotion. And the police officer says, "Do you know why we're here? Apparently your parents found something in your room that could be worrisome. Do you know what that is?" And he says, "Yes, a severed head and hands." At that moment, the deputy asks Brian to follow his colleague. She's a female officer who asks basically the lead deputy, what seems like the lead deputy, if he wants Brian to be handcuffed, and he says no. So she basically brings him to the police car. He says that he's anxious and he's just overheating a little bit, and they're being very nice to him. I think it's to kind of create a trust between him and them. She says that if she's able to, she'll bring him water. She's going to start the fresh air in the car, and he's put in the back of a patrol car. 2 officers go into the house and confirm that there is indeed a severed head in 2 plastic bags, so a doubled plastic bag, in the sink of the kitchen. Because Terry, when she found it in a plastic bin in Brian's bedroom, she took it in and she couldn't really feel what it was. She said she held it and she was wondering what it was and she couldn't see it through the bags. And that's why she brought it to the kitchen sink, opened it and saw an ear and just freaked out. There was another bag also, which we now know are the hands, but she says she didn't open them. Brian is taken to the station, and in that car ride, he makes 2 very strange statements. One of them is, Grand Junction has become very violent recently. And the deputy, the lady, does not give in to his whatever he's trying to do. And then they pass a bridge, and Brian says, it was under that bridge. And again, I think she's not engaging because he's a minor and she knows that she can't be asking him questions. First of all, he's not with his parents. And second of all, anything that he does answer is not going to be used anywhere. He's taken into the station and he asks, "You don't mind if I'm not handcuffed?" She's like, "No," but she still stays behind him, which is protocol. He's not aggressive. I don't think they see him as a danger in that exact moment. Before we go into the interviews, I want to make some connections for you guys. When the car was released back to Brian's parents after it was in the river, his dad was trying to salvage what was of that car. He didn't know if it was going to run again. He didn't know if it was going to be, useful again, but he wanted to clean it up as much as he could before he could get any type of evaluation done on it. So his dad started cleaning the car, and he was going through basically whatever was in the car, and he found a 12-inch knife in the glove box. And I don't think that is what alarmed him, because later on, I think it's the dad or the mom that says that they had found that previously in his car, and he had said, "Son, you don't need this in your car." And he had said, "Yes, I do." I think it's the dad. So he said, "Yes, I do, Dad. I don't trust anyone." So I don't think this was the first time that Brian Sr. had found the knife in the car. What worried him is when he opened the passenger side door, he found a wallet of someone he didn't know. The wallet belonged to Warren Barnes, a 69-year-old homeless man. At that time, he didn't know that, okay? He just found basically very basic ID cards in the wallet, and one of them was for People Ready. People Ready was a place where Warren worked. So after he had asked his son, why did you have someone's wallet in your car? And Brian had answered, "I found it at the boat ramp." So his dad was, pushing a little bit because he had seen also some blood smears, and he started pushing Brian a little bit. And Brian was like, "No, Dad, nothing happened. It's just I found that wallet there." So his dad says that he wanted to trust his son. He wanted to believe his son, so he kind of let it go. He still called People Ready, and he called and he said, "I found this person's wallet at the boat ramp." And the people from People Ready knew that Warren never went to that spot. Warren had a very solid routine. He slept at the same place, and he would go every morning. He would go to People Ready, and then he would go to a bridal shop. The owner would put a chair there, and he would eat his sandwich, and he would read all day. So when someone said, "We found the wallet of Warren Barnes at a boat ramp," and he didn't show up at People Ready in the morning, both people from People Ready and the bridal boutique owner freaked out. They called police immediately, reporting him as missing. So police started connecting the dots. During his interview, Brian Cohee Jr. did not hold back. But when I say he did not hold back, I need to give a huge trigger warning, because the details that I'm about to give you are gruesome. They are horrific, and they are of a monster. Basically, when Brian is interviewed, he is proud, he is excited, and he is very willing to give details, which is basically a police officer's dream, an investigator, because they didn't have to push anything. They did have to use some strategy in the way they were asking their questions to manipulate Brian into thinking, he knew more than them, and they were very impressed with how much knowledge he had on crime and criminology and things like that. So they used some techniques, but Brian was very willing to give details. He actually made maps for them where to find things. So Brian explained that on the evening of February 27th, he was in a pretty bad mindset. He was spiraling a little bit, and he needed to go for a drive, and that was not out of the ordinary. He would go for drives, and he wasn't at those moments hunting for anything. But that night, he decided that was going to be the night. He was looking for anyone that wouldn't be necessarily immediately missed. Little did he know that Warren Barnes would be immediately missed. But anyways, so he went for a drive for about an hour and a half. Around 11 p.m., he spotted underneath a bridge, I think it was close to Cohen Street, they said, he saw a shape that he figured was a homeless person. He put on 3 layers of gloves. He walked over to that shape that he saw on the ground. That shape was Warren Barnes sleeping, and he started stabbing. He stabbed Warren in the neck 30-ish times. And then in a frenzy, he didn't stop at the neck. He stabbed in the head area. He also carved the eyes out, and he, as we know, chopped off the hands and the head. When the detective pushed and asked, is that the only place that you stabbed him? He smiled and said that he opened up his belly. He also said that he opened the belly because he wanted to see the guts. And he also smiled in the creepiest way when he said that they were pink. He even offers to demonstrate how he did it. He said that it took about a minute, maybe a minute and a half to do the actual murder. He also explains that he was making animalistic sounds as his victim was asking him why he was doing this. He also cut up the arms in 2 different places, and I'm not sure why he did that, but he decided to throw the arms randomly about the scene. So he would throw pieces of the arms. So he cut here, and then he threw them. He even put on the map where the police could find the body parts. To transport the head, he put it in an old pizza box and put the hands in the back of his car. He drove home and put the body parts in bags, and he was trying to prevent it from smelling, so he doubled the bags, which is what Terry found. His goal was to eventually go and buy an empty paint bucket and put the head in it and throw the head and the bucket into a ditch, but he never got there. So when he got home, he washed his clothes. So he had worn, I don't know what the term in English is, but you know Michael Myers, what he wears in the movies? So he had dressed up as Michael Myers previously at Halloween. So he decided to wear that to go do his activities. And when he got home, he washed it twice to remove any trace DNA or any DNA. He tried to sleep, but he couldn't. So he drove back to the scene and put the body in the trunk. So what happened that morning of the 28th at 2 a.m. is that he drove to the boat ramp. He put his car onto the boat ramp, backed up, and tried to take the body part and basically throw the body. And that's what he successfully did. He put the torso, basically, and the legs into the river, and he was afraid that his DNA was going to get on it, so he was pushing it with his feet for it to go down the river. But he didn't have 4-wheel drive, so when he tried getting out of the river, it didn't work, and the car, as we know, ended up in the river. But then he was freezing, and then he thought he was going to die, so he was freaking out. He got out of the river, and he basically waved down a duo. So I think it was a grandfather and his son in a car. And he got help from them, first of all, warming up in the car. And Brian's phone was dead, so he couldn't call his parents. He couldn't call the police. So basically, he borrowed a cell phone, called his parents. Parents called 911, called the police. And he knew the son, like the younger of the duo, went to school with Brian. And he later said that he knew of Brian. He didn't really have an opinion on Brian, but he knows that like his friends hated him because he pushes the limit all the time. The grandfather said that Brian's demeanor and actions when they were helping him out made him uneasy. Like he was pacing and he kept saying, "I'm so fucked, I'm so fucked, I'm so fucked." So that can translate into 2 things. That can be, my car is in the river, I'm so fucked, my parents are going to be so mad. Or, there's blood everywhere, my car is there, I'm going to get caught. So I don't know what he meant by I'm so fucked, but anyways. And then he lied to his friends about what happened. He lied to his parents and to the police about what happened. During the interview, he is acting what can only be described as strange. He's smiling at very weird moments of the very intense recollection of the story. He is excited about the fact that he is now famous, I guess, because they do ask him why. There's a couple of times where they're trying to get the why out of him. And he says, although I'm fascinated by serial killers, I wasn't really motivated by them. He's motivated by fame. He's also said, I've always wanted to know what it was to kill someone. So that was basically the motivator. He wanted to kill someone. He wanted to know what it felt like. And he likes the fame part of it. And that's why he's being so detailed, and he knows he's caught. So he's going to give as much detail and try to be as infamous as possible. He's wanted to attack, kill people from outskirts of society for a really long time. His friend, where he was actually at when his mom wanted him to come home and the police to come and get him at home, he was at a friend's house. Her name was Kylan. She said something very strange. At some point, she says that he had talked about killing people from outskirts of society before, and then she says that that's not true. He hadn't said specifically that he wanted to do that, but she does say that what she thought he was going to do was be more of a mass shooter or a mass killer instead of someone who attacks a homeless person savagely in the middle of the night. Like I said, he was at her place when his mom basically made Andy, Brian's brother, tell him that he needed his car back because Brian had Andy's car. Kaylin's mom actually took a picture of her driveway when Brian left her home to go back home, because he had rushed out of there and he had lifted dirt and rocks and whatever, and her mom was thinking, why is he in such a rush and why did he just destroy my driveway, basically. And that friend was a longtime friend, and she said, I understand why people don't like him. You either think he's funny or you really don't get it and you really hate him. She liked him. When Brian is being interviewed, like I said, he said that he did it because he's always wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone, because both Bundy and the Zodiac Killer had stated that it was the best feeling in the entire world. And then the police officer says, so how did you feel during it? Did it feel good? And Brian really thinks about it, and he's like, did it feel good? Not really. He was empty of any emotion when it came to savagely stabbing a completely innocent old man. Anyways, of course they interview also his father and his mother, both separately. You can see that the dad is more detached from it, in the sense that you see that he has never really wanted to get into what his son really was. I think he wanted to play, put his head in the sand quite a bit. He says often that he wanted to believe his son and things like that. He also states that his life is ruined. He knows that his mom won't be able to have any type of kindergarten anymore. He knows that in town, everybody's going to think of them as, the murderer's parents. And he has a realization that their life is over, basically. His mom, I feel like she downplays a lot of things that has happened in the past. She knows that Brian was a bit off. She knows that Brian was troubled, but you can see that she's trying to act as if everything was a bit light, and this is kind of extreme. But if you had paid attention, to be honest, and they tried, I see that they brought him to therapists, they tried to get him evaluated and whatnot, but I think they didn't know the depth of the dark side of their son. They interview teachers as well, and the teachers were already on alert when it came to Brian, not only because of his past attacks on other students or his troublesome behavior or jokes or type of personality, but they had also found a notebook in which Brian had put details of serial killers, their number of victims, their type of serial killers, and things like that, which to me, I had that kind of, booklet when I was a kid because I was just fascinated with criminals. But Brian's notebook also included what felt like plans to be violent, plans to kill, and that was a huge red flag. I would have never had anything like that in my notebooks. I was fascinated with the crime, with the criminals, but I was never at risk of committing any myself. And when you pay attention 2 seconds to Brian, you know that he did. One thing that I found very unfortunate is the body cam of when basically police go to the scene to confirm the gruesome details that Brian has been giving. And when they get there, the first police officer that stands there, and he, of course, the images are blurred because it's probably a very traumatic scene. And then he kind of spots a piece of the arm, and then he goes, yeah, there's one there, and then there's one over there. And his colleague, a woman officer, walks in to that area and starts laughing. So I'm gonna hope and pray to God that it's her nerves that kicked in, because it's so absurd. It's such a scene that you never think you're gonna see, because how disrespectful, honestly. During his interview, he does ask the detective how much time he's expected to do. I think he thinks he's gonna go to jail for 15, 20 years. But he was charged with multiple things and multiple very severe things. He was charged with 1 count of evidence tampering, 2 counts of tampering with a deceased human body, and 1 count of murder in the first degree. Of course, he needed to be evaluated for his mental illnesses and for his actions and the way he acted during his interview on the body cam footage and stuff like that. So on May 22nd, 2021, Dr. Laura Serrano Amerigo, she's a forensic psychologist, and she specializes in cases of not guilty by reason of insanity, which is what Brian is pleading, by the way. And she started a 6-week evaluation of all of the data, all of the evidence that they have. So body cam, the interview footage, everything that's in Brian's past. And she says that he was not on any medication and had no signs of psychosis during the detailed account of the murder. And she concluded that he did not meet the legal standard for insanity during the murder because he was not suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the murder. During the trial, of course, a ton of people testified, and the deliberation lasted for 2 days, and it concluded on Wednesday, January 17th, 2023. It was a Wednesday. He was found guilty on all counts, and he was then, later on, sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, which is, I believe, the correct sentence. Yes, he is mentally ill, but he was very conscious of right and wrong. Premeditation was through the roof. I have never seen a murder, especially a murderer at that age. So he was 19 during the murder, and at his sentencing he was 21. But at 19, to have that much premeditation is really, it's severe. He is and will continue to serve his sentence in the Buena Vista Correctional Complex in Colorado Springs. I want to take a minute to talk about Warren Barnes. We've kind of glanced over who he was and what he did for the community as a homeless person. He was loved and respected by everyone. He would not accept a handout. He would always think of people in the kindest manner. He would give his time, and he would only ask for friendship in return. There was an article in the Rocky Mountain PBS by Matt Thornton about Barnes, and it reads as follows. I just put a sample of the article. I'll put the link below if you want to go read it. Barnes was a staple of the downtown Grand Junction community. He was a man who loved to read and had many friends, including local wildlife. Feeding birds and getting lost in books, Barnes could often be found in the same breezy way day after day. Between Monique's Bridal Shop and Out West Books, Barnes lives on through a new permanent metal art memorial dedicated to who some called the Reading Man. The artist, by the way, is called Tim Navin. The article continues, "To me, I would call him the Birdman," said Monique Lonati from Monique's Bridal and Former Wear. Every single day he would eat Subway and give half of his bread to the birds. Half of it. There's not many people that I can say would do something like that, to have so little and still give half of it to birds. Lonati said Barnes has always refused any kind of handouts. Money and food were no interest to him. Only friendship. Lonati was one of his good friends. She used to sneak cookies into his bag when he would decline a free meal. Lonati often placed a chair outside in the breezy way, so Barnes had a place to sit and read. "I've never seen him not finish a book in a day," said Lonati. "He would sit behind the shop and just read religiously." I've heard him say to all of his friends, to Lyndall explained, they would say, "Have a good day, Warren," and he would always say, "And you also." That was just his response, and it was kind of unique. You don't hear that verbiage very often. And under that metal statue, they actually put, "And you also." I think it's under the book that is on the metal statue. Like I said, I have a very soft spot for old men, and I think that it's a tragedy, a monstrous offense that his life ended this way. I'm sorry for the Cohee family for this tragedy as well, because they don't deserve this. I think they tried very hard, and I think they were a good family, and it's no reflection of what Brian did of his family. Although I do think that Brian Cohee Jr. deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life, I do think that there is some sadness around him that is not deserved. So I hope that his family finds peace and calm. I hope that Warren's close ones also find peace. I think it's very beautiful how much he was loved. Sometimes homeless people kind of go unnoticed, and I'm very happy that he had friends. On this note, I hope that I get to interact with you in the comments below. I hope you see me in the next video. And until then, stay safe, stay curious.